Hey everyone, Dr. Dano here again. Today I wanted to discuss the topic of fear. Fear is innate in all of us. Each and every one of us has some type of fear or anxiety at one point or another in our lives. Fear has really been innate for all humankind, and it started back to our ancestors. We had fear because as men, years ago, men were primarily hunters and gatherers. So they had to go fend for themselves to survive, for food. And within that becomes this fear. So this fear is almost serves as a sort of caution or protection at times. But oftentimes when fears become overwhelming, or there is really no truth behind a fear, it prevents us. It paralyzes us. There's something called this fight or flight response, which we're all familiar with. So when we are faced in a situation that calls for us to feel some type of uneasiness, anxiety, or we feel in danger, what happens to us is we have this natural innate ability biologically that kicks in. So for some of us, we've heard the good old tale of the fight or flight response, but in addition to that, there's a third. So there's a fight, flight, and even a freeze response, which often we don't hear about. So how we fight typically is we fight ourselves or someone else. So for example, we can take that fight internally. So we have this fight with ourselves. So that self-talk, that negative self-talk that we often have, perpetuates in a cycle and then creates low self-esteem, negative self-thoughts. So we're literally fighting ourselves internally. Secondly, we could be fighting other people. So this is when people tend to act out against others, whether it be verbally, physically, emotionally, where we try to defend ourselves and put this barricade up between us and other people. So that's really where the fight comes from. The flight usually manifests as an escape. This escape is typical through drugs, through gambling, through sex, through excessive spending, anything to really distract our minds. Or it could even really be an escape by physically running away, running from a relationship, a job, someone's house, a treatment program. And ultimately, at the end of the day, really what that person is really doing is just escaping themselves. And they are lost in their thought process, and they feel that by escaping it, that they could really run from their own internal thoughts and fears. The last is this freeze response. So this is when someone becomes emotionally paralyzed, numb. They really don't have the ability to really face what's happening. They're often in denial. These are people who tend to sort of immobilize. You really get no reaction from them. Their face is very flat. There's no sense of if they're happy, if they're sad, and they really might not have the ability to even feel anything at that point. They don't know how to respond or react, so they really just don't do anything about the situation, which can be pretty overwhelming and paralyzing for someone to experience. Fear could really manifest in us in so many different ways. It's this innate sort of scared feeling of being rejected. You know, us as a social species, we always want to feel attached, connected. There's this feel of failure, fear of the unknown, really not knowing what's to come in the future, and that scares people when it's not really upfront. It's not pretty much there for people to get a grasp on, so it becomes this fear, this internalized fear, and imagining what might happen or what's to come. Also, what happens then is it prevents us from really reaching our true happiness, because this fear prevents us from doing something that we might want to accomplish something we dream about, from moving ahead in relationships, in our job situation, personally, health-wise, physically, whatever it might be that this fear is preventing us from doing. So we really need to take a step back and really realize and come to terms with what is preventing us from taking that chance, from taking that risk. What is it worth? Something that you could think about is devising a pro-con list and seeing what are the risks that I really am fearful of, and are they realistic? Is this really going to happen? Is this a realistic outcome? And if you stop and think, oftentimes our fears are irrational. They're part of our automatic thoughts. It's fearing the worst as a protection for ourselves, which is understandable. But at some points in our lives, we need to have a leap of faith. Take that into account today and do something that makes you fearful today and see how it turns out for you. Dr. Dano speaking. Take care.